So we need to start making our veggie oil boiler. So it's basically an electric water heater that's going to be modified to heat up oil so that it can dry it, and then also to filter that same oil. So that big water cylinder that's behind me is going to be the basis for our cooker. So what we need to create is essentially a modified electric hot water cylinder that boils oil, or at least gets it above 76 degrees Celsius and holds it there for 2 hours and then lets it go cold again. That process basically dries the oil. Essentially it'll, when you get it hot, obviously we want it as hot as possible. 76 is the minimum, so we want to make sure it gets as absolutely hot as we can, so 100 degrees would be amazing. If we can get it to that temp and then we leave it there for 2 hours and then let it go cold overnight, that then allows the water and the oil to separate. So then you can put a drain bung at the bottom of that tank and you can drain off the oil just as you would, with say oil and water sitting in a normal column of water. It basically exacerbates the process because you're using the heat to really separate those two components out. At that point, the oil is considered to be dried, and there's a couple of tests that you can go through. The crackle test is generally the best one to use to determine if you've got water still in your oil, and I'll go into detail about that crackle test. I haven't done one yet. I need to learn about that first, so I'll figure out how we do that, and then I'll show you what we do there. The next step, once we've got the oil dried, we then need to filter the oil. So we need to take out any impurities and so on and take it down to the smallest particle size we can. So we're going to go down to 1 micron. You can go smaller, but you probably don't need to bother going much smaller than that. So for us, we're going to get it down to 1 micron, and at that point it's ready to put into Brupeg's tanks. Now the issue we face, Brupeg has such big tank capacity that with the system that we have right now, we could use the single tank that we have, the single electric hot water cylinder that we have, to create a boiler and filter system. But that's only going to allow us to produce 300 litres of fuel every 2 days. If we were to try and fill Brupeg's tanks using that system, it'll take us 90 days processing fuel every single day without fail, so no breakdowns whatsoever, and it takes us 90 days, almost a third of a year, to be able to fill the tanks. So it's not going to work, so we need to be able to increase the capacity. So one of the thoughts we had was using 2 tanks. The first idea was having the boiler get the oil up to the 76 degrees or higher and leaving it there for 2 hours, and then straight away we're going to pump it across into a separate tank that it'll cool down in that separate tank, and then we can drain that oil the following day, like separate the oil and water out the following day. By moving the hot oil across to the second tank, it then allows us to firstly cool the oil in that, basically a storage tank. It allows us to cool and separate the water and oil in that storage tank, and then it also allows us to start processing another 300 litres in the first tank. So and then we will need to add a third tank to move across the second batch of 300 litres across into a third tank, and then we'll move the first lot of oil, the dried oil, back into the heater, get it back hot again, and start filtering that through. So I'll draw a bit of a diagram and I'll show you what we need to build. Okay, so we're going to have our first tank. So this is going to be a 300 litre processing tank. So this will be able to get up to hot and cold, up to 76 degrees or more. We're going to have to modify the thermostat to do that, but this tank will be our main tank that does a lot of the work. From there we're going to put it across into a storage tank. So this will be have a 300 litre capacity as well, and there'll be a third tank, hole in the insulation. So there'll be a third 300 litre storage capacity. So 3 tanks are what we're going to build. So the first one is going to be our boiler. The second one is storage 1 and storage 2. So the process on the boiler, we're going to have, we can only fill these boilers up, we need to leave about 25% of the top empty, just allows for expansion and heating contraction and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to have a drain bung on the bottom, and we're going to have an inlet about 3/4 of the way up. What that allows is basically the water level, the oil level inside will only go pretty much to that point there. Once it gets past there, it's too hard to push it up, and we will put a pressure relief valve on the top, so it'll just be a dump valve of some sort. This here will have a heating coil in it, and that'll take us up to the 76 degrees or more, and we need to put a filtering system in this boiler. So this is our filter. We're going to have a pump somewhere in this mix, probably down below here, that'll be pumping, and this will just be circulating through that tank as such. So we need to make sure we can circulate it through up to 7 times through this filter. So if it takes us, let's say we can empty this 300 litre tank in 10 minutes, we need to filter it for 70 minutes, pushing it through that filter at least 7 times. We also need to put in a T-valve, so after the pump and before the filter, the T-valve has to come over and allow us to dump into storage 1 or storage 2, and then these tanks here have to be able to come back in. Let's go down the bottom. They have to be able to come back in and be fed into the inlet of this tank. So it starts to look a little bit complex and a little bit here and there, but basically it allows us to move oil from any tank back into this main boiler, and likewise from this boiler out into any tank that we choose from. So there'll be a few bore valves and things involved in this, and a few various fittings that we need to adjust and modify and so on, but it's a pretty simple system. It's basically a heating tank with a filter and a pump on the side, and then the ability to transfer the oil from one tank to the next. So it's pretty straightforward. So this book here is our absolute Bible when it comes to doing this conversion. So it's called Powering Your Vehicle with Straight Vegetable Oil. It's written by a guy called Forrest Gregg, and we've been in touch with the people that have done this book. It's incredibly well researched, and there's a huge amount of decent information in it. So the thing that we're going to be building is called a frybrid still. So I'll show you the diagram there. So that's basically what we're making. It's a pretty well tested system. There's dozens of these out on the interwebs where people have sort of documented what they've done and how they've built them. So we've looked at a lot of those. We're mainly going to be using this book as our guide. There's a lot of conversions that are done based on this book. So yeah, if you're interested in looking into this for yourself, I'd strongly recommend getting this book. Yeah, I've read this probably, I don't know, 15, 20 times now. It's an awesome book. So yeah, we'll get into this conversion.
Well, down here in Nola on Fowler Street, when you reach Magnolia, hold your feet at this little store run by my sweet Maureen. If you go in there, you won't come out the same. No, you won't. She's got ways to bring your mojo back. Voodoo spells making you the...
So Ryan's just got stuck in and ripped all of the insulation off this tank here. So if you can sort of see the tank there, we've decided we're not going to use this one. I'll show you why. This tank was going to be our storage tank, so we'll heat the oil up and then move it across to store it in this one. But if you can see all of this rust all the way along the bottom here, right the way along, this fitting here had completely rusted out, and then it had leaked down. This was the bottom of the tank down here. The water had leaked down and sat, you can sort of see the gap between the insulation and the tank. It sat in that gap all the way around the bottom here, and then just worked its way along, and it completely rusted the bottom of this tank out. So all the way along the bottom here, it's got a pretty big sort of gark mark all the way around. So yeah, this is pretty buggered, this tank. We're not going to even attempt to try and save this. So because of the rust on that tank, we're not going to bother with it. We're going to, I suppose, go back to a simpler system. We're going to use a single tank that heats, dries, filters, and then processes all of the oil. So we've started making it, we've started dry fitting it all together. So I'll show you how we're doing it. So the tank itself has just been dry fitted together, so none of these fittings have any thread tape or anything like that. It's all pretty simple at the moment, just sitting there to make sure it works. So we start off with a 1 micron filter, and then it feeds down to our pumping and our ball valve system. So I'll show you what's going on with the valves. So there's a lot going on down here, but it's all relatively simple. So we've got 3 ball valves in the system. Currently everything's in the open position. So we have a ball valve here that shuts off the tank from the outside world. We've got a ball valve here that this actually controls our float system, so we can see this clear pipe here tells us how much fuel we've got in the tank. Let's put that back on. We've got our continuous rated gear driven DC fuel pump, and then we've got a ball valve here just to lock off the ability to suck from the tank. Now all of these ball valves are 1/2 inch, so everything through here, the tank, the pipe, the pump, everything is 1/2 inch. Mainly just because I had a whole bunch of spares, but it can be whatever you want it to be. Obviously the bigger it is, the higher the flow. So the full process from start to finish, if we want to suck oil to be processed into the tank, we open this valve here and we connect a pipe from here into a tank, into like just a waiting holding tank. We close this valve here off, like so, and then we have this valve here open. So we have this valve here closed, like that. Now the fuel flow basically comes in through this valve here. It bypasses this valve because it can't go anywhere, and it goes straight to the pump. It can't go into the tank, so the only place it can go is into the pump. There's a vacuum created in here, and it pushes it all the way up this filter here, this pipe here, and it goes into this filter. Now this pipe is going to be insulated when I'm finished, but it's just sitting there for now to make sure the system works. So at that point the tank has oil in it, and we can start heating it up. So we close all of the valves off and so on, and we just start heating the tank up and get it up to our sort of 80-90 degrees. When we want to start filtering the oil, we close this one off. This one will stay closed, and we'll just open this valve here. It's got those little lock things on it. Right, there we go. So we open that one there. So again, it can flow from the bottom of the tank, and it can come to the T-fitting that the pump's connected to. The pump will start just pushing it up, and it'll just do a circle. So up this line, through the filter, into the tank, back out the bottom, up the line, through the filter, back into the tank, and it'll just keep doing that cycle. And we need to make sure it does that cycle at least 7 times. I'm a bit pedantic, so I'll probably do it sort of 8 or 9 times just to be certain. But that basically gets the fuel filtered down to what it needs to be. When we need to then empty the tank, we keep this one closed. Now this valve here, I'm basically saying it's closed the whole time. It pretty much stays closed the whole time. The only time I leave it open is when I'm filling the tank, just to make sure I'm not going to overfill it. So to empty the tank, we just open this valve here, we open this valve here, and then the oil will just naturally flow straight out. Now if that doesn't work, so if gravity isn't enough, and I suspect I probably won't have enough weight in the oil and gravity and all that to push it out, if that doesn't work, then there's a plan that I'm going to put into place would be to essentially pump the oil up this line again, all the way up through the filter, and I'll probably lift this filter out and create a T-fitting in here with a ball valve that has another pipe that I can just take off and put into a tank or into a car or whatever it is that we're trying to pump into. But for now I've just got it directly connected to the tank. You can see here, this is our pressure relief valve. So if we do start to get too much pressure in the tank, this will release and oil will come down here. Now I'm going to screw a hose tail and a pipe onto here and put it into a bucket or something just so that it doesn't go all over the ground. But basically this is our safety mechanism, and I've got 2 of these, so if we need to have a spare, if this one doesn't work and we need to swap it out, we've got one to go. Now the last thing I have to do is this. Come around the other side so the sun doesn't blind you. The last thing I have to do, so this pipe is our float pipe, so it tells us how much fuel we've got. So we've got this fitting, it's a 3/4 BSP that screws directly into the top of the tank up here. I need to weld that there, drill a hole and weld that there onto this little fitting so that I can plug this pipe onto this fitting, which connects to that there that screws into the tank. So that's the last piece of engineering I have to do, and then this is all ready to start putting together. So when we're at that stage, I'm just going to go through, I'll strip everything back again and I'll start putting thread tape on all of the parts, now that I know that it actually fits. As you can see, nothing really lines up, so everything's all loose, but once we get thread tape in there, everything will start looking a bit tidier. Yeah, but we're making some pretty good progress on our boiler. So we've got everything hooked up now. We've got our sight glass working. Our pump is now working with a little 12 volt power supply here. It's currently heating up. We've got about that much water in the tank and it's currently heating it up. So obviously you can see the level of the water there on the sight glass. So we're going to turn the pump on to make sure that works, and then that should prove the, I suppose, the filtering capability of this setup. So, hey! So you can see it's filling up what is basically the filter housing. We've taken the filter out of it, but it'll basically fill the housing up and then it's going to push the water into the drum. So you should hear it. There you go. You can, yeah, okay. I can just hear it leaking into the tank now. So I realised I made a mistake. So I can't heat the oil too fast. If I heat it too fast, it's going to basically create a whole bunch of convection current within the tank. So I have to heat it much slower. So this is a 3.6 kilowatt element, and this is a 1.8 kilowatt element. So it's the smallest I can get for this tank. My plan is to basically, it takes a lot less energy to heat oil. So my plan is to put a really gutless element into it. And that way, by doing that, I can basically slow down the convection so it'll warm up slower. It won't get as hot, which is okay. And it'll also, it'll also use less amperage. So I'll be able to run the 12-volt pump that I've got off this one cord because it kept blowing breakers. So yeah, I had it too powerful, so now we're backing it off.
It's filling
It's siphoning up there, isn't it?
Yeah, if we let this go, it should theoretically get to the level of that.
Yeah.
I don't know, a pair of vice grips or something, or just
Clamp of some sort.
clamp the hose, maybe?
Yeah. Gonna have to be pretty solid.
I can get 2 pieces of metal.
Yeah.
Might be too solid.
Yeah, I think I can kind of figure out all the bits that don't work very well, and then when I cobble together a better system, I'll try and engineer those out. Alright, so we got it pumping. We managed to basically tip oil in the top of the tank and fill the bottom, I don't know, 20% of the tank up, and then that allowed us to basically create enough pressure between the pipe coming from the tank and the pipe going from the hot water cylinder to be able to suck it through with the pump. So that noise behind me you can hear is the pump basically drawing the fuel out of the IBCs and into the water cylinder. So we got the boiler all up and running. You can sort of see the level in the sight glass. You can see the level there. It's, I don't know, 2/3 full, something like that. Eventually we did manage to pump enough oil from the tanks, from the IBCs and into this cylinder. So it's all up and running, it's powered up. So the plan now is to basically just wait. We've put the boiler on. I think we're supposed to give it 2 hours. So yeah, we'll probably go a bit cautious. It's set at the lowest thermostat setting. So the element on this doesn't kind of vary the power, it just varies the amount of time that it's on. So we've got it set at 50 degrees Celsius, which is the lowest possible setting that we can do on it. So we're going real gentle, just to make sure that we don't explode or do anything crazy. So yeah, I suppose we'll hook it up, get it running. It's all going as it is right now. We'll leave it there. It's 5 o'clock, so we'll come down at 7 o'clock and just sort of see how it's all going and then switch it off. And hopefully in the morning when it's all cooled down, we will have separated oil and water. So it'd be interesting to see how that all worked out. So we've heated the oil up. It's been sitting overnight, so it should have cooled right down now. So we're going to drain off, and theoretically we should have separated the water and the oil. I've not done this before, so it's kind of interesting to see if it's actually worked. Oops. So I don't know how to tell if I've got rid of the water. So that's something I'm just going to have to learn. So I'll keep mucking around with it until I've figured that bit out. So this is my filter housing. It doesn't have a filter in at the moment, it's just empty because we're just using it to push the oil through. So what I've got to do now is, now that we've basically drained off the bottom sort of 20 litres or so just to get rid of any water, we're going to crack this filter housing off. I'm going to dump this oil back into my settling tank, put the filter in, and then I'll start basically heating this up and then I'll filter the oil. So can sometimes be a bit of a messy job, this bit. Now, filter. So we're just using a pleated paper filter. These are definitely not the best things to use. So just preempting anybody taking the piss out of me in the comments, you need to use a bag filter, but we don't have a bag filter. We have one of these, and this is just a test rig, so I know that this is not going to last. I'm hoping to maybe get one batch of oil out of it, and then I know it'll fall apart. One of the things to know is if you're going to use any of these filters on a veggie oil system, you have to get the ones that have got like the built-in rubber O-ring top and bottom, and this has got a plastic sleeve, like corrugated sleeve. I don't know if you can see it, but right down the center, it kind of just gives it a bit of strength and makes it sort of hold stiffer. If you get the ones that are just the spun poly, they just fall apart and the oil just bypasses them and they're garbage. So just don't waste your time or money. It's just not even worth it. They don't work. Bag filters are pretty much the only thing that work. That's, again, I'm not an expert in this by any means, but that's just based off that book that I showed you early on, and then people that have done this, it's pretty much what everyone goes with, either that or a centrifuge. So this is our first go at actually filtering the oil. So we've got basically, this drum is about sort of this full, maybe 2/3 full, something like that. We had it set at its lowest setting, so we've halved the element strength. So it used to be 3,600 watts, and we now got an 1,800 watt element. We've had that running for, I don't know, 4 hours, something like that, so it's nice and warm. We've got it set at its maximum setting on the thermostat, so it's 80 degrees Celsius, so it's definitely quite warm. Now, we tried it really conservatively when we first started, 1,800 watts and 50 degrees Celsius, and just didn't do anything, so we bumped that power right up, and it's good to go now. So what it's doing, the oil is basically pumping out of this pipe here and through the fuel pump. It's going up this pipe here and into this filter. This is a 1 micron filter. So you can see that sort of bubbling away there. Basically the oil comes up this pipe, goes in here and drops down on the outside of the filter, and then gets pushed through that filter and up the center and then into the tank. So it's a 1 micron filter. I know it's not going to filter everything down to 1 micron, but if we can get everything sort of less than say 2 micron, I'll be pretty pleased with that. This is just a test. I know that filter's not great, but this is just a test to see if we can actually get the system to work. And then we'll upgrade it with bag filters or centrifuges, something along those lines. So hopefully in an hour or two, we're going to have some filtered oil. So this is the first batch of fuel that we've been able to produce. Now, before anybody jumps on the comment bandwagon, I'm not going to be using this oil. I'm pretty sure this oil is stuffed. I think it's been oxidized, but it gives you an idea. This is filtered down to 1 micron. I can see a couple of bits of rubbish in there still, so clearly the filter's breaking down a bit. But this basically shows that our system is working. So we need to upgrade our filter because the filter's missing a few things. But we were able to heat the oil. We're able to take the water out. We did that last night. Yeah, it's essentially working. So we've proved that we can make the oil boiler, and we just have to refine a few things. Just yeah, basically just the filter and a couple of ball valves where we're going to be taking things out from. But yeah, we have ourselves a working system. So we've learnt quite a bit doing this experiment with the veg oil. So if you're going to go down this road and start doing it yourself, there's a few things you need to know about actually using this as a fuel. So it starts off, veg oil starts off pretty clear, so a bit like olive oil or canola oil from your supermarket. It's pretty much a clear, you know, with a slight sort of yellowy brown tinge. If it starts going dark like this oil here is, it's basically starting the oxidization process, and if it goes down that road you can't use it as fuel. And once it's oxidized, you can't actually unoxidize it. So there's a few people out there that are looking at options to try and reverse that, but once it's gone down that road, it's pretty much not usable as fuel. So there's a few stages of oxidization. So it starts off nice and clear and usable, and then it starts going dark. At that point, you know the oxidization is starting to happen. It also smells like paint. This one here actually smells a lot like varnish. So you know that's when that's happening, the oxidization is sort of really taking hold. And then when it starts to go clear again, you know that it's fully stuffed. So at that point, there's pretty much nothing you can do. So a couple of things. When you're storing your oil, so ideally you want to settle the oil for a good sort of 2 months or so to get all the solids and the heavy stuff right to the bottom, so that you can skim off the good stuff at the top. When you're storing it, you want to store it as cold as you can, and you also want to store it out of direct sunlight. So the colder and darker you can keep the tanks, the better. So for us with Brupeg, our tanks are not going to see any sunlight, and they're under the waterline, so they're going to be, you know, at sea temperature the whole time. So, you know, where we are, it's going to be fairly cold. So it's a good way that we can actually stop the oil from oxidizing for as long as possible. And then, yeah, obviously we'll be moving the fuel around and filtering it as much as possible. And then all of the work that we've done with the tanks to try and stop them from being in contact with any sort of steels that'll bring that oxidization process on faster. So a few things that we've learnt, and it's been yeah, bloody interesting experiment. Behind me here you can, oh, that way, start all that again. So this book here is our basic, so this book is our Bible for this conversion. So it's called Powering Your Vegetable, fucking Powering Your Vegetable. So this book here is our absolute Bible for this conversion. So it's called Powering Your Vegetable. Fuck! Not called Powering Your fucking...
Powering Your Vegetables for me.
Oh, if you want to power your vegetables. Oh, take 9.
Hey, I heard you want to leave this place where we grew up. This old town, just put it all behind. Remember you and I would always find somewhere to hide when we were kids, so we could see and hear the water run. The river's gonna cry when you're gone.